implementing an employee ownership trust is how do you design the trust structure? There's a couple of key elements to think about. The first one is which type of trust do we use? You might have heard before of things like family or discretionary trusts. They don't work for employee share plans, and I'll explain the reason why in a moment. The second type of trust you might have heard of is a unit trust. These are actually quite common, and often listed entities use a unit trust type structure. And the reason we use unit trusts is, as the name implies, the ownership of the underlying assets within the trust is divided into units. That means if we have 3 or 4 employees in the trust and they all own slightly different amounts of equity in the employee share trust, we can identify and calculate that ownership ratio by the number of units held by each. So if there's 100 units in the trust, one employee owns 50, 2 employees own 20 each, and the last one owns 10, then we can simply work out very easily their respective percentage ownership, which also is equivalent to their respective equity ownership of the underlying shares, their respective percentage entitlement to income, for example, dividends that are paid into the trust are then allocated based on units. The unit trust structure is also quite important because normally in our plans each year, we're allocating more equity to employees, whether they buy it or earn it or some other mechanism comes into play. As the employees increase their shareholding over time, they're normally allocated further equity, and that's represented by ownership of more units. The unit trust structure, and our peak performance trust is actually a special type of unit trust, is by far the most common. Discretionary trusts, as I mentioned, normally are not used for employee share plans because, as the name implies, the allocation of equity and income is discretionary. It's worked out by the trustee each year, which is perfectly fine in a family trust environment, doesn't work well in an employee share plan. So designing the trust structure is really important.